What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So last week, we of course had the Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis announced as systems heading to the Nintendo Switch Online with the new expansion pack tier, but we did get new details that came out after the Direct around the games, as well as the controllers. We're going to go over that one here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Halo Infinite, as the latest flight did run over the weekend, creating a ton of excitement online, introducing us to the full PvP lineup for Arena and even objective type games. And we're also going to be talking about a clip that started to make the rounds and go viral last week, giving people maybe their first real look into next gen. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with a game that was announced last week, but went kind of under the radar with all the stuff that was happening with that Nintendo Direct. That is Blossom Tales. That's right, we got a new game in what's now a series. We can see the trailer that was released here. This for Blossom Tales 2, The Minotaur Prince. Now, this is coming out next year, 2022, and it's currently set to release on Steam for PC and on the Nintendo Switch. Over on their website that they have set up, they have a little description here that reads, "With the charm of a classic top-down action adventure, your journey will take you through haunted forests, pirate-infested shores, and other mysterious lands across a vast open world. Discover charming towns and townsfolk, enemies ready to give you a hard time, weapons for every occasion, and puzzles set to boggle your mind." Now, I really enjoyed Blossom Tales, the one that's out now. You can pick it up on the Switch, PC, all that, but it is it's definitely a callback to like the Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, kind of that top-down action adventure game with a bunch of puzzles thrown in there. And I recommend really everyone to check it out if you enjoyed those top-down Zelda games, and usually it's pretty cheap anyway. So I am certainly going to keep my eye on this one and see what else they have to show us as we head into 2022. Also, one of the big reveals at the Direct was Bayonetta 3, that closing things out and giving people a sense of relief that Nintendo didn't forget about the game and that it seems like it's on track for a 2022 release. Well, something was pointed out with a connection that got people speculating once again around this whole thing. We can see this over on Twitter. This from JP Kellum saying, yeah, the controlling the summons thing looks very similar to a mechanic that we had in Scalebound to control Thuban. Now that I've gotten to rewatch the trailer, I'm really psyched for that. Now, Thuban was the main dragon that was shown with the main protagonist in those trailers. And even at the end, when 2022 gets slashed in half, people are even wondering, wait, is that the character from Scalebound? So now we have these Bayonetta 3 Scalebound connections being made, which of course is going to lead to all kinds of theories about potential shared world, even though the game Scalebound never came out. It was canceled. It's not too hard to believe that Platinum maybe looked at the idea they had there and said, maybe we could implement this in the Bayonetta 3 and take that franchise to a whole nother level. I mean, we saw how large those summons were. There are going to be some pretty big set pieces and very epic moments, I'm sure, with those larger creatures that you're controlling. So we'll keep an eye on this, see how it continues to progress, especially with that character at the end slashing 2022 in half. Oh, and I let you guys know last week about in-store PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X sales that were going on at Best Buy, and some of you even said you managed to get consoles there, so that's great. Looks like there is another in-store event coming up here for GameStop. They have this page set up that says join us September 30th for an in-store PS5 bundle event. Now, they do have select cities that are placed here with Atlanta, Dallas, Fort Worth, and New York City, so you'd want to search by your city or zip just to see if they will have your store participating in this. But the good news here, like I said, going forward is that we are seeing these systems start to pop up in stores again, which means online you should see prices hopefully start to fall a bit. That's really the end goal, is that you can go online and just buy one of these outright without any issues. The biggest problem we're going to have going into the holidays, demand will start to spike once again. But I'm hoping that as we head into 2022, certainly in like the first half, we should see those prices normalize back to, I'm hoping, under $600 by next summer. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with new details around Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack tier, that having Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games. Now, the biggest thing around this, of course, is when they held up that Nintendo 64 controller, letting you know you'll be able to use that classic controller from back in the 90s now on your Switch. People got excited, even though the price, yeah, it's a bit high at $50. I think more so, though, for that Sega Genesis controller. But we did get some high-resolution screenshots of the controller, specifically the top of them. And we can see that here. This was shared by Nintendo, where they say high-res photos of N64 and Sega Genesis controllers showing new buttons. Now, when we first saw it, there were going to be some questions as to, okay, how do we go back to the home menu? Where's the share button potentially? Any of that? Because on the front, it's of course mimicking the standard Nintendo 64 controller that Nintendo released in the mid-90s. But looking at the top, we can see several buttons as well as a USB Type-C charge port. Now, it's the same over on the Sega Genesis 3-button controller, where they have the snapshot and video capture as well as home, and then the USB-C port. But if we look at that Nintendo 64 controller, we also have ZR at the top, which tells us that on the bottom, I guess Z will just be ZL, and that, of course, if you use a standard Switch Pro controller, or if you're using the Switch in handheld mode, you'll know that ZL is Z. We also have that sync button at the top, and yeah, the placement is a bit weird. I do wonder if maybe when you're pressing RL, kind of where your fingers would be there, if you could sort of slide over just a bit to hit either home or snapshot. Remember, the snapshot or share button is kind of on the fly. Like, you'll be doing something, you're like, oh, I want to capture that real quick. So it is kind of out of the way and something you would have to think of, okay, I need to go press this in order to capture the screenshot or video. The one part I'm really curious about is on the other side of the controller, specifically where that memory, like the memory card or the rumble pack would go into. That has not been shown yet, and I assume it's just going to be hollowed out plastic in there. Like, I don't think there's going to be another connector, because I'm assuming that there is rumble built into this Nintendo 64 controller. Looking at the box art for Star Fox 64 that they showed in that slide, it does mention the rumble pack there, and I mean, I don't think we're going to get a rumble pack separately sold, so like they would probably want to play into that with kind of the HD rumble just being a part of this controller that they're selling. But looking at those high-res shots of the controller, the 64 and in particular, it looks pretty authentic. Like, it does appear that Nintendo was really trying to recreate it one-to-one, so I'm excited to essentially buy a brand new Nintendo 64 controller from Nintendo again here in 2021, as this is all scheduled to go up late October. We're still waiting to hear more information around pricing for this new tier, and I'm crossing my fingers that it's not some outlandish thing where they're trying to go up to like $60 or anything in that range. I'm kind of thinking it's gonna be $10 more. So like 20 to 30, 35 is still kind of pushing it. But what about the games themselves, specifically region by region? Because something else was noticed when it comes to the PAL region with these games. It appears that they're going to be running at 50 hertz. In fact, it got to a point where people were even testing it in like a video editor. John from Nintendo Life had this video that was posted up where he went through and tried to sync everything up and found that, yeah, when it came to Nintendo Direct in Europe, because remember, all these different regions have separate directs. Like in Japan, they may announce different things, like the 3-button Genesis controller to their audience, and it is different from the American or European direct. Well, it looks like the footage they showed for, say, Ocarina of Time was indeed running slower and would get out of sync, because apparently it's going to run at 50 hertz, which means they're just grabbing the basic ROM images, I guess, throwing it on there, maybe doing some upscaling in an emulator that they have. But the good news here is, because the Switch is region free, you can just sign into another store and download the Switch online application there, much like we do with any of the games that are specific to the Nintendo Switch Online Japan application. So there you go. I guess if you're in Europe, you don't want to deal with potentially 50 hertz across the board for these Nintendo 64 games, you can sign into the American eShop and just go ahead and download the Nintendo Switch Online app there. But I'm excited to find out more, and that should be happening within a month. We're looking, like I said, towards the end of October to not only have this launch, but of course, get the pricing details around the expansion pack. Oh, and I did see some questions around Game Boy or Game Boy Color, because that was something else that was rumored. Well, we can see Tom Phillips over here on Twitter saying, for what it's worth, N64 and Mega Drive were the two Nintendo Switch Online platforms I'd heard about, alongside Game Boy, Game Boy Color. I'd imagine N64 and Mega Drive are being rolled out first, as they're more enticing things to prompt people to upgrade. And Nate did mention this as well. He thinks, yeah, we'll see Game Boy, Game Boy Color come down the road. I'm thinking that's one that they throw in to the basic $20 Nintendo Switch Online tier and save Game Boy Advance potentially for the expansion pack. And then who knows, maybe someday we'll go up even further and we'll get Dreamcast and GameCube involved. I think there is a long play here for Nintendo to build this up and eventually break the entire selection of games off into its own subscription, provided they can build up the Nintendo Switch Online to where it's passable, or at least, I'd say, comparable to the original Xbox from 2002. Next up, let's talk about Halo Infinite and the flight that ran this past weekend. Now, there will be another flight this weekend coming up, and it appears they are continuing to open more and more spots, so you may want to go sign up. They were kind of alluding to the idea of not having to go through Halo Insider to be part of Big Team Battle coming up. That's gonna be a ton of fun, 12v12, but I think they want to open it up to more people just because those games will have 24 people in each one, and they want to make sure that there are plenty of people playing and stressing their servers. But this past weekend, they did open up player versus player, and it was a blast. I mean, this is a ton of fun right now with Halo Infinite, just in the limited modes that they have set up with Arena, and the fact that we are just playing against other people gives us a good idea as to how people will approach different game types, even as they even opened up Capture the Flag, or they had like the Control the Points set up too. But the big thing here is that grappling hook, and it was on full display with things like Capture the Flag. For example, you can see this one here tweeted out by Milkway, showing off just how much of a difference the grapple shot can make when it comes to having the flag get thrown across the map. And it does appear to be pretty powerful, but in CTF maps, there generally would be someone who's very good at actually traversing and getting the flag from one point to the other, whether you're just kind of throwing the flag, or in this case, maybe getting them that grappling hook, setting things up with a couple of kills, and then having them grab the flag and Spider-Man their way across the map. In fact, people have even done little compilations already with the grappling hook, kind of mimicking the idea of being Spider-Man as Master Chief, flying around these maps. It does look like it's just people are having a ton of fun, and it feels like Halo is back. And that's the best part, because there was a lot of confidence lost in 343 with Halo 4 and then Halo 5, and then Master Chief Collection came out and that was a disaster. It has gotten significantly better there, but everyone really wanted that big Halo experience on next-gen platforms. While this is still on the Xbox One, it does appear that 343 has at least set themselves up well on the multiplayer side with Halo Infinite. Campaign still remains to be seen, and I guess we'll find out more about that as we get closer to release for the game officially in the first week of December. Next up, let's talk about a clip that went viral online this past week that people were saying this looks like our first real experience of next gen, specifically the visuals. Now, what's weird about this whole thing, this game's been out for a while. Like, I think it came out towards the beginning of this year. In fact, I went back and looked. There was a blog post from Sony kind of hyping up, just doing some marketing for this game last September, a full year ago, and then they mentioned it was coming out next January. So there's potential this game's been out for 7 months and we just haven't noticed, because you can see this clip here. This was posted up by Joy of Gaming. Now, maybe there have been updates or other things that have gone through Ride 4 in order to get this reaction, or maybe it legitimately was just, hey, I had it in first-person mode. Here's me driving around, that got people excited at the idea of what looks like realistic visuals and graphics on a PlayStation 5. And I'll admit, it's super impressive. It's a first-person view of someone driving around on a bike, and there are some that come in and of course say, well, the physics are off a bit and like the turning isn't quite right, but I think it's more or less just down some of the straight lines that they're going, and you see the houses and the trees and stuff fly by, and it's set up well enough. Overcast with, of course, a rain-slicked road that puts off the reflections. Yeah, it does look realistic because it is set up in these perfect settings for the environment itself. Like, if it was sunny and you had maybe people on the sidewalk or something, it might not look as realistic. But games like these, specifically with cars or bikes or any of that, do at least have a bit of an advantage with not having to do things like render people's faces, right up against the camera. But it is super impressive, and people were saying if you drop the resolution down a bit, even some were saying like 144p or something, basically you're just trying to blur the image up to even hide some the small imperfections that may pop up. You do get even a more true-to-life look at a GoPro video possibly that someone's driving around, with. So I would say go over, check it out on their channel, and see what you think with it blown up on your screen. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Last of Us Day. Now, this day takes place on September 26th. Every year, Naughty Dog will celebrate the Last of Us series, and of course, people hope that there is some big announcement for this series. Like this year, a lot of people are hoping for multiplayer, maybe Last of Us Part 2 Factions. Well, a blog post was made over on PlayStation's website, and that's not what happened. We can see this over here on their site, where they say Last of Us Day 2021, a community celebration. They say we're excited to share new digital content, exclusive merch, and a special photo mode event. They have, let's see, Last of Us Part 2 covers and rarities now streaming in limited edition vinyl. Last of Us Part 2 Joel statue, PlayStation Gear Store. They say we got that exclusive merch, and the triumphant return of photo mode. So at least right now, does not appear to be any kind of announcement towards a Last of Us Part 2 Factions for the PS5. But we saw the hirings they were doing, so it's clear they're working towards some sort of multiplayer or live service game type, something here with Naughty Dog, whether that is for The Last of Us Part 2 or maybe just its own game, just a complete spin-off from that, or maybe a brand new IP. A lot of possibilities here, but there was talks that Naughty Dog was going to do some sort of wrap-up for the Last of Us Day, so maybe they throw a little tease or hint in there like, hey, we didn't have anything to announce right now, but keep an eye out towards the future. It's pretty obvious that Sony has the cinematic single-player experience down pat. It's more or less their multiplayer side they need to continue working on, and I think Naughty Dog with a multiplayer Last of Us game like a Factions coming in this generation with the PS5, potentially kind of experimenting with it on the PC, would be very good for PlayStation overall. So if they don't have it to announce here, I think it's still gonna happen, just might not be until next year when they look to announce it. And before we go to the comment day or two of the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, are you signing up / upgrading to the expansion pack service for Nintendo Switch Online? That is, of course, provided the price increase isn't over the top. 53% said yes, N64 and Genesis games are worth it, then 26% said you're sticking with your basic Nintendo Switch Online, and then 22% said that you're just not subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online and you don't plan on it. I mean, 53% saying, yeah, Nintendo 64 and Genesis is enough for me to potentially spend $10 more, maybe $15. That's not bad, and I think that's the biggest thing is Nintendo wants to get to a point where they can charge $60 someday for their online service, or charge $10 a month for its own separate app, which would in turn be $120 per year. Maybe that's what we're working towards with the GameCube and Dreamcast and all kinds of stuff being jammed in there, but for now, they're just seeing how many people maybe look to make the jump or even sign up brand new for Nintendo 64 games with online capabilities. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Patrick saying, let's be honest, if there was a Smash character in this Direct, a lot more people would be disappointed. The Smash character reveal is generally a double-edged sword. You can either get a ton of excitement and hype like if you show Banjo-Kazooie, or you get a ton of frustration, disappointment, seemingly anger if you show a Fire Emblem character, or you just get mass confusion to the point where Twitter breaks if you show Steve from Minecraft. Now, looking at this though, there's usually a conversation either way and a ton of engagement online, which in turn means that Nintendo is being talked about, so it probably doesn't matter either way to them really, but they're trying to drive sales. Obviously, they're setting up October 5th for what looks like a big reveal, but also Sakurai's last time with a Sakurai Presents. This could be one of the last times we see him at all. So it'll be interesting to see what they have in store for us there. Maybe even Sakurai reflects a bit on his time working on Smash Bros. As an entire franchise as he sets up maybe to show off Goku or Sora. Now, I guess leave your best guess down below as we work towards that day next week. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the Nintendo 64 games heading to the Switch alongside of the Genesis games? And are you picking up that 64 controller to play them and head back to the 90s on your Switch? Also, what about Ride 4 and that footage that does look very close to a realistic GoPro recording? And then what about Halo Infinite? Did you get a chance to play it over the weekend? And what are your thoughts? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.